Hello, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci of Candid Frank Live, where you'll find us airing our views here on the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google, Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on Candid Frank Live, joining me as usual is Aaron William Freeland. Hey, Aaron, how you doing, bud?
Doing all right, Frank.
Got
How
the,
are
got,
you?
the, got the hiccups all of a sudden.
A momentary thing.
Wait, let me look at you a little closer. Ah! Okay, they're gone.
Perfect.
That was a joke. Not a very good one, but it'll do. Okay. Normally we start with, if I'm not mistaken, we start with the Canadian Football League. Why don't we do that again? Als
Sure.
beat Red Blacks to close Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah. So the Alouettes definitely took care of business. They managed to hang on at home to beat the Ottawa Red Blacks 19-12 on Thanksgiving Monday. It was a rainy game. Austin Mack was leading the way for Montreal on offense, had 4 catches for 92 yards. And Davis Alexander started in place of Cody Fajardo. He scored a major on the ground while also tossing an interception. And Jose Maltos made all 4 of his kicks to help the Owls improve to 12, 3, and 1. That means that they pretty much got everything locked up as it currently
Oh yeah, they had
stands.
everything. They
So
had everything locked up before the game even started.
it's one of those things, they're perennial contenders. It doesn't help to get frustrated over that sort of thing. But I mean, the good news is on the other side of the coin, the Toronto Argonauts are right behind them at 9-7-0. So they've managed to lock up a spot, and it looks like Ottawa has as well, even with that loss at 8-7-1.
Yeah, they've locked the yeah. Well, basically, Hamilton's loss ensured that. Yeah, Montreal's the favorite now for the Grey Cup. So now what's left to debate? You brought it up, and it's quite true, and that is that final playoff position, which is second in the Eastern Division. Let's talk about the Rough Riders, who guaranteed. Speaking of second place in a division in the Western Division, wow. I think the only way to describe this is they embarrassed the Lions at home in a playoff game.
Yeah, this is one of those rather comprehensive, I guess is the kindest way to put it, victories. Can't necessarily call it an even game or even relatively close when the finals 39-8. Saskatchewan has won their 4th straight to guarantee themselves at least second place in the West, as well as a home playoff game. Friend of the show, Trevor Harris, put together another strong game from inside the pocket. Had 271 yards through the air and threw for 2 touchdowns. Samuel Amilis brought down 6 of his second targets to lead Saskatchewan's receivers with 94 yards. Nathan Rourke was 15 of 23, throwing for an even 200 yards, while also being picked off twice. Um, I'm curious to see. I'm wondering if you've got a take on this as to why Nathan seems to be having so many issues in BC and fitting back in with the Canadian game after having been so successful not that long ago.
But my theory is very simple. They ruined him in the NFL. They just
That's it.
ruined. They ruined his confidence.
Mm,
The play that was 2 years of rejection that he has put up with. You don't get over that overnight, right? He was told for 2 years he's not good enough. He's not good enough. He's not good enough. And then Three Down Nation did a story on him, and he was talking about how the NFL didn't respect what he did in the Canadian Football League. Um, I think that's the tip of the hand there, Aaron, where he basically is saying maybe it rubbed off on him a little bit that he didn't respect the Canadian Football League, and maybe he's over, the combination of two things. It's that not coming back to the Canadian Football League, and coming. The irony is he comes back to the Canadian Football League clearly. Is this a fair statement? I need your help with this. He comes back to the Canadian Football League and the BC Lions as their savior and the guy that is going to give them the championship they want so much at home. Is that a fair statement?
you know what? I think you're not wrong in that regard. Hyped as the rookie of the year, and the next one. found out the hard way the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the border, and now has to face the sharp reality that it's not as easy as it looks, um, and he's got a long way to go to come all the way back. I mean, he was down 26-8 at the break. Uh,
And
that's
anyway, to finish my point, and then he comes back here, and they give him the highest paid contract that the CFL has. Now, take those two things into consideration. His confidence is a little bit shaken by the fact that he knows he didn't get the kind of respect he deserved when he went there. He comes back here, and they're looking at him as the savior. They give him the biggest contract there probably is. If he was holding a stick, he'd be turning it into sawdust. That's the full complement of my opinion. He's in a tough place because he really wants to do really well. He's not relaxed. And because they didn't give him a chance, unfortunately, it looks like what it's going to take is an off season for him to flush his brain of the experience in the NFL, which he has not flushed, and be prepared to come to the Canadian Football League, where he kind of, in a way, Aaron, when he said the NFL didn't respect the Canadian Football League and what he did there, I think he admitted something there. That there's a Freudian slip there that came out. Maybe he didn't respect how much the Canadian Football League meant to him when he went there. And now when he's come back, there's a lot of mixed emotion and a lot of, angst, and it really screwed up his brain. The whole experience just screwed up his brain. And I think we as sports fans may not understand the complication in an athlete's mind, but we've seen evidence of it. We have a gymnast in the United States that said, you know what? I got to take a break. And because being an athlete and being a super athlete, like these athletes we're referring to, it's a tough road. And listen, it's not a tough road like a guy who works 80 hours a week to pay his mortgage and feed his 7 kids and wife. That's not the kind of tough I'm talking about, but just in the context of being in sports.
No, it is really a two-way street. You have to respect the CFL, and at the same time, you know, realize that greener pastures aren't necessarily going to be in your future, even if you do leave, if you don't respect the where you came from enough.
Absolutely.
So
And the last thing to say is this. How big a target do you think he has on him when they give him that kind of money? And everybody knows how much everybody talked about how great this guy was. And everybody knows how everybody was pulling for him in the CFL. And everybody knows he didn't make it in the NFL. And now, he's up against a lot of players who wish they had the chance that he had.
yeah, and to come back after 2 years off and just get handed the biggest contract in the
Yeah.
CFL, that's got to make a lot of people bitter.
There's a lot of there's a lot of there's a lot that can trap there's a lot of emotional traps that exist in this whole situation for the poor guy. And like I said, I think with an off season to really decompress, because I think he's the opposite of decompressed. He is very compressed, and in that compression, there's no being an athlete. The asset athletes have is their natural ability and their ability for their brain to connect to that natural ability. A poor guy's not connecting to his natural ability, Aaron. That's all there is to it.
And I don't know if this, I want to jump ahead a little bit before we come back. I don't know if this is going to make a difference at all, but apparently Vernon Adams Jr. has been tapped to start in the Lions regular season finale.
Well,
So
that speaks to, I think, the BC management team has realized what we've just discussed, that this kid's going to need an off season to work things out. And whether they have the option, they have this option. The guy that at the beginning of the season, everybody was going, MOP, 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 MOP. Now, what a terrible position to be in, to be able to look at your sideline and go, there's a guy who was going to be the MOP. I know we took the guy and signed a guy, the future MOP, but maybe now we'll give that other guy a chance and see what he can do. Not a bad second choice, Aaron. Not a bad second choice at all. I know there's a lot of people that are saying he isn't that player or wasn't that player or lost the ability to be that player, but a lot of it had to do with health concerns. So now the hope is, if you're a BC fan, is that Vernon Adams is healthy. and he's emotionally ready to take this team. You know, he has had short streaks of like 2, 3 games. How many games are left in the season?
Well, I can say with reasonable certainty that I know that there's one game left in the season, and
And then
potentially
2
two
more.
playoff games if necessary. So if
You get what I'm saying? Like
yeah,
he has
100%.
been able to string together a couple of really good games back to back to back. So
Yep.
don't be surprised. He could, he could salvage this season for the ownership of the British Columbia Lions, who, who he thought he had a much better chance until last week. And you know what? If Vernon Adams plays the kind of game that he's capable of, and he does that thing that some quarterbacks can do, and that is take the bull by the horns and win the game almost totally by themselves. Hey, listen, he's a candidate. In my mind, he's a candidate to be able to do that.
I mean, he has thrown for over 2,500 yards this season. It is entirely possible that Vernon could catch
Absolutely.
fire. So I respect and appreciate the decision to do this. I appreciate BC Lions management taking a look at the entire situation and realizing that Nathan isn't perhaps in the best headspace to be doing this sort of thing. So we'll see how they run out the string here. I'm very looking forward to that.
Well,
As
go
it
back.
is,
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
as it is, but BC is going to be playing Montreal, so they're definitely going to be in tough. Um, you know,
Absolutely.
uh,
So let's continue to number 6, and then we'll go back to 4.
sure.
The Tie Cats, vengeful in mind because the Argos eliminated them this past weekend in making the playoffs, they decided to take Justin Marshall and went, there you go. You kicked us out of the playoffs. We're taking your receiver.
Yeah, no, Marshall had spent the last 2 seasons with the Argonauts on the practice roster. 6'3", 210 pounds, native of Conyers, Georgia. Big boy, fast. Played 13 games in his lone season at the University at Buffalo in 2022, registering 64 receptions for 837 yards. He actually spent time with the Falcons as an undrafted free agent in 23 before signing with the Seattle Seahawks. So, there is a certain capability there. And if they're looking to play spoiler or just be a pain in the tuchus, that's a way to go for sure.
The Argonauts beat the Bombers in the Deja Vu Bowl. I call it the Deja Vu Bowl because this was a lot like the Bomber game they lost last time they lost, and it happened to be against the Argos. And repeat performance. They just couldn't do a lot of stuff right, and the Argos didn't make enough mistakes to lose.
No, and I think that's really what it comes down to in the playoffs as well, is making sure that you don't make a lot of mistakes to make sure that you keep yourself in the picture. I mean, Kelly threw for 203 yards and a touchdown, while Mackay Polk led his team's receivers with 82 yards on 4 catches. David Unger III had Toronto's only touchdown of the day, with a 13-yard grab in the first quarter. Kalaros, well, on the other side of the coin, was 23 for 30 for 249 yards and an INT. Brady Oliveira totaled 105 yards from scrimmage on 21 touches, and Kenny Lawler was actually the leading receiver, going for 108 yards with his 6 receptions. But it was a very, very low-scoring game. We were tracking the game while I was playing Friday night hockey there, and just looking at the score going into halftime and partway through the third quarter and most of the way through the fourth quarter, going, "Geez, is anybody actually going to score?"
Well, listen, the Argos did what they needed to do, and we didn't mention about the Bombers in Saskatchewan before we get complete the CFL talk. The Bombers, if they lose next week and Saskatchewan wins, Saskatchewan finishes first.
That is true. Thanks to their tie earlier in the season, they would actually finish ahead.
Yep. So it's
Oh,
interesting situation that's developing the next week's game. If you want home field advantage, very important for those two teams. British Columbia, on the other hand, they have BC have their game where they can see if they can right the ship under center. So it's going to be an interesting week, Aaron.
definitely. And you know what's going to make it even spicier is the game on Saturday at 3 o'clock between Toronto and Ottawa, because Ottawa has the opportunity there to leapfrog Toronto for
Yeah.
home field advantage as well. Again, thanks to their tie earlier in the season.
Well, the Argos
Oh,
only need tie or win against BC and against Ottawa to. I'm hoping. Listen, I live closer to Toronto, so if I want to watch a CFL football playoff game, it's got to happen in Toronto to make it easier. It's either that or
yeah, there was a big shakeup in the curling world actually a couple days ago. Team Gushu had announced that they were parting ways with their second EJ Harnden. Um, Shortly after